Hello, everyone. I'm Chris Sturhahn from Clearwater Analytics, one of the heads of product there, and I'm here joined by two of my friends from the industry to talk about what's going on in the fixed income market. So I'll let you two introduce yourself. Alex, if you want to go ahead and go first.
Sure. I'm Alex Morris, CEO and co-founder of FM Investments, about a $20 billion fixed income shop, about half that in ETFs.
Audrey?
Hi everyone, I'm Audrey Costabile and I'm a senior research analyst at Coalition Greenwich, which is an independent research and consultancy firm.
Oh. Alex, I'd like to hear a little bit more about FM Investments and what's top of mind for your firm right now.
Sure. So we're started off as a traditional multi-boutique, trying to find great ideas and make them come to life. One of those ideas was fixed income ETFs. We're actually great partners together, but the marketplace hadn't yet seemed to recognize that. So 3.5 years ago, we came out with probably the simplest ETFs you've ever seen. We buy the on-the-run treasury and just that, and have sort of expanded an entire marketplace of taking simple things that fixed income investors need, focusing on doing them well, never getting distracted from that relatively simple mission, and then offering investors collections of those securities in ways that help them build meaningful portfolios.
Great. And Audrey, I know you had the pleasure of being here yesterday for Buy Side Day. Tell me what some of your observations are about what you're hearing from the people here.
Yeah, so it's a good question. The answer probably isn't going to surprise you much. A lot of talk about advanced data science, AI, ML. The buy-side sessions really tended to coalesce around this theme, whereas day one and day two, you get a little more variety, I guess, if you will, in the different topics and different panels. So I think some of the important takeaways from buy-side day were probably focused more on what problems you're trying to solve with AI, and really trying to be specific about how you're using it. So what's interesting about that is if you came to FILS last year or the year before, AI was obviously an important topic as well, but it was less specific. It was kind of like, what is AI? How does it work? Is this a black box? You used to hear things like that, and today it's a little bit different because we're talking more about things like, what problems are we trying to solve using advanced data science? How do we measure the success? How do we backtest? How do we use this thing? What type of people do we need to make it happen? So there was a lot of that type of talk on my side, more than anything else.
And Alex, what did you get from it from a practitioner's perspective?
I think it's interesting that when we do talk a lot about AI now, which has become relatively new. I always take a moment to remember we made it pretty far being naturally stupid, and so we try to automate our way through this. The big paradigm shift was really the access, right? We all have had a lot of great ideas, and I think that's what we heard yesterday. Things we've been trying to do, where folks are on their automation or electronification journey, all of this coalesced in the same way. We've just now built a tool set where the average person can talk to it in a way that makes sense, see output in more or less real time, and iterate, which is great. I think some of the things we heard yesterday, some sounded fantastic, some sounded fantastical, and probably shouldn't get done, but we'll see. It's the wonderful thing about innovation, somehow or another, the Tyrannosaurus Rex loses out and the platypus wins, and somehow we get there. But I think also a lot of folks are looking at markets from a macro perspective, wondering, was sort of a fixed income winter in zero interest rate policy, and now we have a new Fed chair coming in who clearly seems to be more interested in zeros than nods, and how do we get closer to that? I don't think we're going to get there, but there's going to be a market change in the next 6 months if Kevin Warsh has anything to say about it, and no one's really certain what that's going to be, based on Kevin Warsh, and how we should position around it.
And how are you preparing for that operationally, both with the coming change in rates as well as all the operational changes that are happening with AI?
We've been an early adopters of elements of the technology, but early to adopt, slow to implement, to make sure that it is working, it's working to task. I think a lot of the back office tasks were the first to start to go, and certainly some of the data requests that would come from portfolio managers, salespeople, clients were the first to really fall. Clearwater makes some of that available in its tool, and that starts to work elsewhere in the business and its data set. But slowly but surely, elements of that are helping us improve how we provide client service. Just innovating or providing advanced technology for the sake of saying we did it is maybe an IT's roadmap for the year, but it's not practically in any of the executive teams. And we want to make sure that all of this really is in service of our investors and the clients that we serve every day. Are we helping them understand the portfolio better, make better decisions, make those faster, make the data more available to them and more understandable? And certainly that has been the course of 2026. The good news is this is as bad as it's ever going to be. It's only going to get better. And I think we're really excited for what we can do, less so from how do we trade slightly better or slightly faster, but more how do we make this content more accessible and make investors more engaged in their ownership process.
Absolutely. And with the incoming Fed chair, Audrey, I know you had some thoughts on everything you heard yesterday. What's your view on the macro perspective?
Yeah, so we live in interesting times, right? There hasn't really been a period that I can think of where you've had this sort of culmination of things like tariffs and trade wars and geopolitical. It's just, it's a pile on at this point. I think people, have been sorting it out in various ways, and that's been discussed. One of the salient points that was mentioned that I found really interesting is the idea that rates at a heightened level are actually a reflection of credit risk from a sovereign perspective. Right? There hasn't been a ton of talk about that, but that's really interesting because that then introduces yet another factor, right? That people are going to have to sort through when they're thinking about how to allocate the portfolio and of course how to navigate markets trading. So a lot of information, but as a corollary to that, another point that kind of rose to the surface as well while we're talking about AI and automation is the value of human edge. So interestingly, I just had a discussion with a trader, and she pointed to something that's important, is that in these tumultuous times, you can do a lot with data, you do a lot with technology, but you still need the relationship to understand what's happening out there. And particularly when things are volatile or unexpected, I think this is so important. So it's really this interesting balance of that human factor with technology that's being discussed as well.
It's an interesting point. And I think we've heard a lot about AI and what people are using it for, where it's going. And just building on some of the things that you're seeing in client service with AI, Alex. Are you hearing more, given everything that's going on that Audrey mentioned in the macro environment? Are you hearing more from your clients about wanting to hedge risks, about sovereign rates as a credit spread? How are your investors thinking about their portfolios in this time?
I don't think the risk profile has much changed. Maybe the types of questions have changed, or the detail. Right? It used to be lies, damn lies, and statistics, and now it's hallucinations too. I think it's a bit like when WebMD came out, and all of a sudden everyone was an armchair physician, and they had this exotic disease that can only be contracted from ferrets in the southern hemisphere. And we get more questions like that. What if? Insert very clearly, hallucinated set of scenarios that, even if were possible, was such a small de minimis risk that we couldn't hedge or help anyway. So I think we see elements of that bleeding through, but also I think the requirement that we be more vigilant in providing information. We did a thing for the end of year called All We Want for Christmas is a video production team, and that we look at the level of content that's happening that we're being required to provide, and we should. If we look at where successful products are being sold, regardless of their veracity of true to label from being a good investment product, increasingly ETF shops, all investment providers are now content providers. It used to just be intellectual property inside an investment strategy. Now it's podcast, it's how do you write pithy content, which we love to do. We were sort of writing it into the ethers before, and we're waiting for the world to catch up with it, and now it's there.
It's found you, yeah.
It's found us, and now it's a treadmill we're all on, and AI makes it both easier to do and way harder, because some of the stuff it comes up with is terrible. We've thought about doing the Mystery Science Theater 3000 and just reading others' AI slop and pointing out what's wrong with it. The clients had a small issue with that, so we didn't do it, but I think that's where this starts to go is there's now this weird battle for folks who are deeply empowered with a tool who can do so much thinking so fast, but not all of it great. And it can crunch numbers in ways we haven't thought about, so much that it starts to see patterns where they may not exist. So you have to use the tools to understand the questions you're being asked. Even if you don't want the answers, you have to know what the client, your competitor, the person asking the question, their basis of understanding. And then you can start to decode what they're really trying to get to and then try to provide them some meaningful information and maybe some wisdom to act on in the future. But
So
it's a real game.
So you're seeing AI both as an internal accelerator, but also being presented with the results of it externally. So I have to ask, your view on AI overall, do you see it as a disruptor or as an enabler?
I mean, it's a complete game changer in that sense. I mean, it's disrupting things, but disruption usually means we're going to kind of mean revert. I think this puts us on a different track where we're going to change the way we work. I would fear that we'll change the way we think. And the only sort of antidote to this articulate incompetency that happens is just intuition. And I want to make sure that we don't lose that. I worry about that for my kids and their colleagues in school as we sort of make our way through that process. But I think it's this powerful concept, not just a tool. It's an entire revolution of how we're going to approach work and thinking. It's really great. But now when we send things out, we run it through to say, here's what we think people will say. We make changes based on how it summarized things to make sure that folks who can't be bothered to read it, we're just going to send it to ChatGPT or Claude or Grok. So we know what they're going to understand because it's our duty to make sure that the content is delivering the information we want to deliver. And I think if you put your head in the sand assuming that's not happening or afraid of what you might see or that maybe that's too intellectually dishonest, bad news. Everyone's doing it. So you better play along or risk being left behind.
So Audrey, you have a unique viewpoint getting to sit across everyone in the industry. And what do you see disruption versus enabling across everyone?
Yeah, I mean, AI is clearly a tool, right? One of many. And I think there are some very strong use cases for it. But Alex, as you pointed out, there's hallucinations, there's impractical use cases, there's bad use cases. And we've seen a lot of those too. So even from my seat as an industry researcher, we've seen a lot of bad research that's very reliant on AI when it's inappropriate to rely on AI that much. So I think what's happening, and this is the theme that's been coming up, not only here at FILS, but just across the industry, is when is it appropriate to use this tool and how should we use it? I realize those are very broad questions for a response to your question, but we're still figuring it out. I think is the way to summarize that, and where we land in a couple of years is probably going to be very different than where we are today.
I wouldn't be surprised in a couple of years that we're no longer shocked that there will be a $1 billion plus valuation company started by a prompt, sort of taking care of itself. And it's an interesting, there'll be a lot of white collar jobs that get impacted, but a lot more jobs that will be created. Turns out humanity's pretty creative. We do also have some demographic problems in Western Europe and North America, declining population rate. So if we do want us to sort of keep increasing GDP with fewer people, eventually we're going to need to become more productive, and this seems to be the mechanism. But it is a unique opportunity of how do we put the appropriate guardrails. The government has come in and sort of said its piece of what it wants to do, but individually each company, each division, each family unit has to decide where does this go for us. And it will be an arms race to get better versions, to be more thoughtful in it, to be cheaper in using it. But it is now part of every conversation, and that tells us something.
Yeah, I mean, the societal implications alone are staggering, right? And what will happen beyond just the discussions that we've had here, but AI and robotics, AI and a whole bunch of other things. How is it going to change operations? I mean, these are all, we could spend half an hour on all those topics alone at least. So given that we're a little short on time, let's go to the lightning round. Both of you, if you were to give a piece of advice to a fixed income firm today, what would it be?
Oh, that's a weird time to give advice to markets. I think in the end result, there's a lot of talk about government change and threats to the republic here and elsewhere. You have to look past all of that. Just, if you believe in capital markets, this whole thing's going to work out. It turns out buying the long bond and buying the long tips is probably the answer to most of your problems, and you shouldn't be afraid of that being the answer to most of your problems.
Mine's easy. Do your research.
All right, thank you both very much for talking with us. See you the rest of the month.
Thank you.